November 1943. The rain was falling hard over the volcanic ridges of Bougainville, turning the jungle floor into a black, sucking swamp. I want you to picture the scene exactly as the men there described it to me decades later. Palm leaves dripping, rifles held tight against the chest, breath shallow. Somewhere ahead, hidden in the green wall of vines and smoke, something hissed. Not a gunshot, not an engine, a hiss. Then fire came crawling through the trees, low at first, hugging the ground like a living thing. The men swore it felt alive. They didn't yet know what they were facing, but they would remember it for the rest of their lives. I have spent years studying strange weapons of war, but few inspired the kind of quiet fear that followed this one. This was the moment many Allied soldiers first encountered what they later called the weird Japanese flamethrower, a weapon so primitive in appearance, yet so terrifying in effect, that entire units froze when they heard its sound. I want to take you back with me, slowly, because this story isn't just about fire. It's about fear, desperation, and a very different way of thinking about warfare. For months before that night, Allied intelligence reports were confusing. Soldiers were reporting bursts of flame that didn't behave like the German or British flamethrowers they had trained against. The jets were shorter, sometimes uneven, but the terror they caused was disproportionate. Survivors described Japanese soldiers advancing calmly through gunfire, carrying what looked like a crude metal insect on their backs. 2 cylinders, thick hoses, a nozzle that glowed faintly even before it fired. At first, many assumed these were captured European weapons, but they weren't. This was something uniquely Japanese. The mystery deepened when recovered equipment reached Allied hands. I remember reading the translated field notes of an Australian engineer officer who examined one of these devices in 1944. His words were simple. Unusual construction, crude, but ingenious, dangerous beyond expectation. That sentence alone sent me digging deeper. Japan did not invent the flamethrower, but the way they embraced it was born from necessity. By the late 1930s, the Imperial Japanese Army faced a brutal reality. Their industrial base could not match that of the United States or Britain. Tanks were fewer. Heavy artillery was limited. Air superiority could not be guaranteed. What Japan did have was infantry, discipline, and a doctrine built around shock, aggression, and psychological collapse. In China, from 1937 onward, Japanese troops faced fortified villages, bunkers, and tunnel systems that refused to fall to rifle fire alone. Hand grenades were costly. Artillery was slow to deploy. What they needed was a weapon that could flush defenders out, alive or dead, quickly. Fire was the answer. The Japanese solution emerged in the form of the Type 93 flamethrower, adopted in 1933 and later refined into the Type 100. On paper, it looked unimpressive. Its range was shorter than German flamethrowers. Its fuel capacity was limited. Its construction lacked the refined machining seen in European designs. But that was the point. The Japanese flamethrower was built for jungle warfare and close combat. 2 cylindrical fuel tanks were mounted vertically on a metal frame, strapped directly to the operator's back. A smaller pressurization cylinder sat between them, charged with compressed gas. Rubber hoses ran to a simple metal projector. No fancy ignition system, no complex valves. Everything was stripped down to the essentials. The fuel mixture itself was peculiar. Thicker than gasoline, often mixed with crude oils or rubberized compounds, it burned slower and clung to surfaces. When ignited, it didn't explode outward like a fireball. It poured, it crawled, it seeped into trenches, foxholes, and bunker embrasures. The effective range averaged only 20 to 25 meters, sometimes less in humid conditions. But in the jungle, that was more than enough. I have spoken to veterans who described the sound before the flame, a low, chugging hiss, like a beast inhaling. Then the nozzle spat fire in uneven pulses, as if the weapon itself were struggling to contain what it carried. Unlike German flamethrowers, which produced a clean, arcing jet, the Japanese stream was erratic. That unpredictability made it worse. Men didn't know where the fire would land next. Operationally, the Japanese used flamethrowers with chilling precision. They were never sent forward alone. A flamethrower team typically consisted of the operator, 1 or 2 riflemen for protection, and often an officer. Their role was specific: neutralize strongpoints that halted infantry advances. In China, flamethrowers were used against caves and urban barricades. In the Pacific, they became instruments of terror against island defenses. On Guadalcanal, Japanese flamethrower teams attempted night assaults, using fire to disorient American Marines before banzai charges. The results were mixed tactically, but psychologically devastating. One Marine wrote that he would rather face a machine gun than a flamethrower. "A bullet might miss," he said. "Fire never does." The weirdness of the Japanese design added to the fear. Allied troops trained against British and American flamethrowers understood their limitations. They knew the range. They knew the fuel burn time. But this was unfamiliar. Japanese operators often fired in short bursts, conserving fuel and creating the illusion of multiple flamethrowers operating at once. There are documented cases where entire platoons hesitated, convinced they were facing a larger force. That hesitation was often fatal. The human cost to the operator was immense. Carrying nearly 30 kilograms of fuel on one's back, under tropical heat, made the flamethrower soldier a priority target. Japanese doctrine accepted this. Operators were told, explicitly, that survival was unlikely. Their role was sacrifice in service of breakthrough. This mindset horrified Allied observers. Captured training manuals emphasized courage, calmness, and acceptance of death. I have read translated passages instructing operators to continue advancing even if wounded, even if on fire themselves. Whether this was propaganda or reality, the effect on the battlefield was undeniable. Comparing Japanese flamethrowers to Allied models reveals stark differences in philosophy. American M2 flamethrowers prioritized range and safety mechanisms. German Flampanzer vehicles mounted flamethrowers on armored platforms. Japan, lacking such resources, put fire directly on a man's back and sent him forward. And yet, in the tight confines of jungle warfare, this crude solution worked. By 1944, Allied forces began deploying flamethrowers of their own in greater numbers, learning, reluctantly, from Japanese tactics. Ironically, American flamethrowers would later be used extensively against Japanese cave systems on Iwo Jima and Okinawa, turning the tables with horrifying symmetry. The psychological impact cannot be overstated. Fire is ancient. It bypasses training and strikes at instinct. Soldiers could steel themselves against bullets and shrapnel. Fire was different. It consumed air, light, and hope all at once. I've read after-action reports where commanders noted a drop in morale after flamethrower encounters, even when casualties were low. Men slept less, jumped at shadows. The hiss of steam or leaking fuel sent nerves fraying. By the war's end, Japanese flamethrowers had not changed the outcome of the conflict. They did not win campaigns. They did not stop the Allied advance. But they left scars, physical and psychological, that outlasted the battles themselves. Today, the Type 93 and Type 100 flamethrowers sit behind museum glass, looking almost harmless. Dented cylinders, faded straps, silent nozzles. But I know better. And now, so do you. Because in the hands of a determined soldier, even a weird weapon can become a nightmare, one that entire armies remember long after the fire goes out.